What's going on, guys? So we have got to get into Ultimate Spider-Man Incursion, because now Miles Morales has finally made his way to Earth 6160, and it almost feels like this is building up to something crazy, so we gotta take our time with this one. But first, if you enjoy videos like these, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so for Ultimate Spider-Man Incursion, we start out on Earth 616, the main Marvel universe, with Miles Morales, who's updating his journal, which is something that's come and gone for Miles over the years after making his way to Earth 616 and getting settled into his new life on this world after Secret Wars. So bear with me for a moment here, because seeing Miles dust off the journal and bring it back, this makes me want to talk about a number of things, like the weird stuff we've seen happen with Miles' memories from his home world, Earth 1610, what Earth 616 means to him in comparison, and I also want to take a moment to talk about the Miles Morales of Earth 616. So bear with me for a moment here, because we covered a lot of this in other videos, but I still want to put it here because we're going to be referencing a lot of this stuff as this story continues, and I believe even more so as this series continues. But in the here and now, with Miles dusting off his old journal, his journal was a huge part of the Spider-Man Miles Morales 2018 series, with it starting out as a class project that ended up helping Miles pull his thoughts together and juggle everything that was going on in his life between being a student and being Spider-Man, having his best friend take his girl, getting kidnapped by the Assessor, who was hired by 616 Miles Morales at one point because he wanted the Assessor to analyze Spider-Man. And like we saw before, the data that was collected eventually led to the Miles Morales clone saga. So yeah, these are just some of the things Miles was dealing with and writing about in his journal at the time. And oh yeah, he also became a big brother soon after too. But all of these events are just a few examples of a number of changes that have already happened to Miles since he made his way to Earth 616, where he's had to deal with a lot of changes that have arguably been more impactful to Miles than him traveling here from another universe, which I know sounds crazy, but it's mainly because Miles' memories of Earth 1610, they're not as clear as most would think, and that's brought up in the story, so we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But among all these crazy events that Miles had gone through, between Spider-Man 2 and the 2018 Spider-Man Miles Morales series, another thing that happened that was really huge was him meeting his 616 counterpart. And we gotta talk about 616 Miles Morales for a moment here, because not too long ago someone asked me if this guy even existed. And we've talked about him on the channel before, but I still want to do a quick recap, because there's something we'll see later on in this first issue that had me like, I want to make sure more people at least have a general knowledge of who this guy is. And he doesn't show up in the first issue, but since we're talking about the new and old Ultimates universe, as well as the main Marvel universe, and taking a Miles Morales Spider-Man approach at that, I already know I'm going to be making references to him, so I just want to make sure people know who I'm talking about. So when it comes to the Miles Morales of Earth 616, in both Spider-Man 2 as well as the 2018 Spider-Man Miles Morales series, we're given these stories of how both Wilson Fisk and 616 Miles Morales were basically best friends. And this even gave us moments where 616 Wilson Fisk mentioned how Miles played a huge role in Fisk becoming who he is today. And back then, the explanation we were given as far as why we haven't seen much of this Miles Morales, part of it was because he had spent so much time in prison, but also with there being times in the past where he told Wilson Fisk that he wanted out and that he wanted to disappear with his girl Barbara. Wilson Fisk ended up taking care of that, and he made sure that there was no record of Miles Morales, which allowed Miles and Barbara to start over. But when Barbara tragically passed, Fisk went out of his way to go see Miles, so they both bonded on losing someone close. They talked about how Barbara hated Fisk and how Vanessa loved Miles, and at the time, Fisk told Miles that when Vanessa was dying, a number of scientists reached out since they knew that he would pay anything to save her, which then led to him learning about other dimensions, which eventually brought Fisk to the place where as long as he knew that there was a Vanessa out there, that was enough for him. So he encouraged Miles to think of Barbara the same way, hoping that the information would comfort him as well. This later led to Miles taking matters into his own hands in investigating these other dimensions. So he hired Taskmaster, who ended up traveling to Earth 1610, the home world of Spider-Man Miles Morales, as well as the Maker and James Hudson Jr., the son of Wolverine. And when Taskmaster told him that there was another Barbara Sanchez there, it wasn't too much longer before Miles made his way to Earth 1610. And when he came back under the alias of Ultimatum, Wilson Fisk was basically like, yeah, you like a brother to me, but I ain't calling you that. And Miles came back rocking a bunch of tech from Earth 1610. And he ended up returning to Wilson Fisk, seeking the opportunity to go back to what he knew, which was running the streets like they used to. And the last thing I want to mention without spending too much time on this is that when this happened, both Fisk and 616 Miles, they both agreed on something Fisk had said first, but they both agreed that people have to live in the world that they're made for. So yeah, I just wanted to get that out there to kind of prep the table for some of the things that we're going to get into here, because it's also a huge contrast in comparison to Spider-Man Miles Morales now, because when he looks back on everything he's been through, on Earth 616, Miles now has this I'm ready for anything type of mentality. And now with him dusting off his journal and getting back into it, he mentions how more recently these are things that he would just talk about with his therapist. But at this time, with overcoming so many hurdles, he feels like he's in a place where he can handle what life throws at him, for the most part, and mainly because he's gotten so used to change over the years. And this leads to him thinking back to the end of Secret Wars, when he brought the Molecule Man, Owen Reese, a burger, and he told Miles, "I owe you one," which is something I want to come back to in just a moment. But aside from this, Miles remembers when the Maker paid him a visit, when he invited Miles to go home, quote unquote, and leave this universe with them. And like we saw at the time, Miles said no, only for the Maker to hand him a card while basically telling Miles, here you go, in case you ever change your mind. And it was a blank card at that. But Miles also mentions here that he knows he's from another universe, but the details are fuzzy, which right there just reminds me of something we'd often talk about, or something I'd often try to figure out whenever we discuss the topic of Miles' memory. Because after the 2015 Secret Wars event, like I mentioned earlier, when it came down to Miles remembering events from Earth 1610, like for example, the Norman Osborn of that world, who was later brought to the main Marvel universe by 616 Miles Morales, this encounter literally hurt Miles' brain, and he even told Norman that it felt like he was punching a bad memory. And that's just one example of this gray area that we'd run into when it comes to Miles remembering either people or events from Earth 1610. So with Miles mentioning this in his journal now, it's not something new. And that's why I mentioned what I said earlier about the different things going on in Miles' life being more impactful to him since he's arrived in the main Marvel universe. Because to Miles, again, a lot of those memories are fuzzy. And I'm pretty sure the Molecule Man's responsible for all these changes that have happened to Miles, because of the whole thanks for the burger, I owe you one thing. Because Miles' life in comparison is way better now. Because after Secret Wars, his father was brought over, his mother was brought back to life, but back then, I don't remember we were ever told directly if it was the Molecule Man or Reed Richards, because an argument can be made that either one of them were in the position to change something. Because for Reed, with him using the Molecule Man as a repository of unlimited power, and his son Franklin as a universal shaper, where he would form them and hand them to Reed, so he could set them in place in their own reality. And it's not to say that Reed knows everything about every universe because of this, but if he wanted to make a specific change in a particular reality, he could have, which is why the Maker asked Reed that whole if you can do it again question. But as it stands, I don't think it's been mentioned, and if it has, I would love to know where, if it was either Reed or Owen Reese who specifically made these changes for Miles. Because ever since, I've been leaning towards the idea that it was the Molecule Man, that it was Owen Reese, who had done this for Miles as a show of gratitude. But aside from Miles mentioning how he knows he's from another universe, though the details are fuzzy, but also ever since the Maker showed up, Miles now feels like there's a secret trying to crawl its way out of his head. And shout out to the MF Doom poster. But this leads to Miles' journal entry describing that secret that's trying to crawl out of his head as a voice that says maybe the offer to join the Maker in a new universe wasn't all smoke. Maybe there's something there that can fill a void I didn't even know I had. But then I spent an extra 5 seconds thinking on it and feel stupid for even doubting myself. So yeah, already in just the first couple of pages, we're given a lot to think about as far as considering what's to come. But in the here and now, when Miles puts his little sister Billy to bed, we see him throw away that blank card that the Maker gave him just before leaving the room, only for it to activate and get Billy's attention, which immediately sets off Miles' spider sense, because now the door to Earth 6160 is wide open with Billy drifting inside. So Miles just jumps in after her, and when he does, he equips his new vibranium suit, and he says here, don't even think, I leap in after Billy out of pure love and instinct. The place doesn't make sense. Teleporting never does. There's no telling what kind of effect this could have on us. I'm close. I'm so close. Quarter of a second is all I need, and then I could use my webs. But in that quarter of a second, Billy arrives on some part of Earth 6160, which could be Wakanda for all I know, with someone approaching her saying, "My, you look to be a far away from home, little one." And for Miles, he ends up landing somewhere else. But the next thing we do is pick up in New York of Earth 6160, with both Peter and Richard Parker, with the two of them seeing this circular portal just open in the sky, followed by a bunch of others just like it. So Richard asks his dad if he's seen anything like this before, and Peter's like, nope, still new to this. So then Richard asks the suit, and as the suit is analyzing these circular openings, Peter's spider sense goes off just before a blast comes out of one of them, only for Jonathan Owen to show up right after. And he's just recently got his powers, because he says here, it worked. It actually worked. That stupid box worked. Suck it, Stark. I'm important now. I have power now, see? And would you look at that? I done found a couple of spiders. But for Peter and Richard, they don't know who the Spot is or anything that they're looking at right now. And it's made clear to them rather quickly that this dude's not a friendly. And in case you're wondering, why did Tony Stark give this guy an origin box? Just know in the here and now, the box Owen took, it wasn't for him. and we'll talk about who it was from in a moment, though I'm sure a ton of you guys will guess this, since it falls in line with Spot's original origin, which we talked about back when Carnage was basically killing the Marvel Universe. But while Peter and Richard are going back and forth with this guy, Peter tells him, hey, this is gonna sound like a joke, but there's something behind you. So that's when he turns around and he's like, what? There's more of you? As the doorway from Earth 616 opens up and Miles comes through connecting that knee. In the way that Miles is moving, because he's been doing this for a long time, and he has past experience from fighting Spot, so he's just ready for all this. And Peter and Richard are just looking at Miles like, wow, that boy good. And in the case of this world's Jonathan Owen, when Miles calls him Spot, he's like, who the hell is Spot? Because in his case, not only did he just get these powers not too long ago, which right there just lets you know that this guy's been trying to find his way back for a minute, and this is his first time seeing any Spider-Man, let alone 3. And I mean 2.5 technically, but you know. But again, Miles just handles this whole thing in an insanely short amount of time because of his experience in this new Spot's lack of experience. And when Miles goes over to Peter and Richard, he's like, hey, Spider-Man, I'm Spider-Man. And Peter, who has his arms folded, is like, yeah, nice to meet you. And then Miles daps Richard and he's like, and please don't tell me your name is Venom. And Richard's like, no, but that's not a bad name though. So immediately Miles tries to take it back, but Richard's just like, too late. My name is definitely now Venom. And right there in Spanish, Miles is like, what have I done? But even here, there's a lot of crazy references just flying under the radar. Because for those who might not know, back in the original Ultimates universe on Earth 1610, Miles lost his mother because of Venom. Kind of. Because on Earth 1610, that Venom was created by scientist Richard Parker, wink wink, and Eddie Brock Sr., who were originally trying to create something that could cure humanity from any kind of disease, which led to them making a suit that would augment a person's body, which later led to them reaching out to Boulevard Trask, who wanted to weaponize the technology. But in Ultimate Comics All New Spider-Man issue 22, when Miles was fighting Venom in Brooklyn General Hospital, he was able to free the host, only for them to get gunned down by the police, and when the pieces of the symbiote tried to latch on to others, the police opened fire, and a stray bullet hit Miles' mother. So yeah, the original Earth 1610 was a cold world. And mainly because in the early 2000s, a lot of it was going for the realism. But yeah, nonetheless, when you look back at it now, it really makes you ask yourself, like, is Miles better off with a fresh start or not? Or what would happen if he remembered everything from Earth 1610 clearly? But nonetheless, it's here where Peter tells Miles thanks for the save. And Miles is just like, it's all good. You know what they say about Spider-Man. Only for Peter and Richard to give him his look like, no, we don't. Which is hilarious. Like, it's literally blank stares. So Miles is just like, we do whatever a spider can? And Peter's just like, oh, I guess I could see that. And after this, we jump forward what we're told is one multiversal monologue later, where Miles has filled these guys in about the other 616 Spider-Man. And when Richard asks Miles about Venom, Miles is just like, I don't really know that dude too well. Which is also funny because back in Ultimate Spider-Man issue 12, the Christmas issue, there was a really brief moment when Richard mentioned Mr. and Mrs. Brock when he told Ben they couldn't make it to the party. So who knows what that'll turn into. But this conversation ends up leading to a moment where Miles tells them, look, I get all this is new for you. Trust me, the multiverse gets old, fast. But I'm looking for my sister, okay? She's just a kid. Could we focus for a little? Just before Miles swings off, with that Miles Morales flair, hitting all kind of twists and flips. And this just has Richard like, can you believe how cool he is, Dad? And for a moment here as they head around to help Miles find his sister, you can tell Peter's getting a little jealous, because Richard's like, when he says, I'm Spider-Man, it just sounds right, you know? Like it fits. And Peter's over there like, I mean, I guess. And Richard is just like, look how he swings. So smooth and natural. He makes it look effortless. And as they continue to make their way around the city, helping Miles by looking in different people's windows and freaking them out while asking other people on the street, this one guy mistakes them as members of the Children of the Eternal Light, who are the pacifist-ish followers of the Hulk on this world. So I guess they be going door to door. But as Peter and Richard continue their conversation, Richard points out how Miles sounds like he's young and somewhere around his age. So right there, Peter goes off like, you know, I mean, I'm a pretty good Spider-Man too, considering how long I've been doing this. And I mean, I also got a wife and a kid. And right there, Richard is just like, Dad, stop. Don't be weird. Which in a way, this reminds me of that whole thing where Dave Chappelle was talking about how his son was just saying all these great things about Kevin Hart. So Dave had to pull his kid to the side and tell him, hey, you know I do this too, right? Like, this feels like the exact same thing. But what's funny is how it turns into a moment of awkward silence before Peter's just like, hey, you want to know what I think is weird? Because Richard's like, oh, here we go. But Peter basically tells him here, like, here's what's weird. Your own father being your second favorite Spider-Man. I think that's weird. And mind you, they're having this talk outside of this old lady's window. And she's just like, get a good look, pervert. And Peter's like, nobody want to see that. And even after they leave, Peter keeps going. Cause next he's like, so who's your favorite father, huh? Uncle Ben? Your English teacher? That college student who babysat you once? Like, he's just going off. And to their surprise, it's here where Spot returns. And this is where we find out the truth about what happened with the origin box. Cause the first thing he says is, I took it. It wasn't for me, but I took it. Tough luck, Tyrone. Which right there lets us know the origin box he took, it was supposed to go to Tyrone Johnson, so he could become Cloak, which makes sense since the original Jonathan Owen from Earth 616 got his powers in an accident from trying to reproduce Cloak's powers at the request of the Kingpin. And Owen goes on to say, it made me somebody. You can't get rid of me. I don't come out. And that's when he's like, you know what? The name Spot, it really ain't that bad. But at this point, Miles is just like, bro, can't you tell that we've moved on? Read the room. So once again, Miles takes down Spot with little to no effort, while Richard's over on the side like, wow. And Peter's just like, And right after this, we find out the different members of the Makers Council, as well as Hand and Director Fury, they're all either informed or they sense directly a dimensional incursion of some kind, where even in the Hulk's case, he's told this is city technology, the unmistakable teleportation signature of the Maker himself, which is a pretty huge deal considering the Maker's locked in the city right now. But individually, this leads to the different council members making their assumptions as far as what they think it could be, whether it's actually the Maker who escaped somehow, or some weapon he'd left behind, whether it's a message, or his own secret agent that he's keeping from everyone else. All the different leaders from the different regions, each of them have their own thoughts on it, but every last one of them comes to the same conclusion, because to them, whatever it may be, each one of them's just like, I want it. Because for a lot of the members of the Makers Council, even though they have their own territories, with some being shared between 2 or 3 of them, in a lot of cases, many of them have their own agendas. And I can see that being their downfall at some point, especially if things get ramped up before the Maker gets back. And as you would expect, the Ultimates noticed this signal too. And they of course recognize that it's the Maker's power signature. But right away, Doom's just like, it's not him. So Tony asks like, okay, well, what are you basing that on? And Doom tells him chiefly that we're all still alive, which is a very valid argument. So Cap tells him he's gonna send over 2 of the Ultimates to go in and check it out. But when Tony sees the 2 that he's sending, he asks Steve if he's sure, cause this could be pretty important. And right there, Cap tells him they can handle it. Plus, they're practically local. But back over with Peter and Richard, who are continuing to freak people out. Eventually, Peter's like, we gotta stop doing this. Cause if they keep looking into all these different people's windows, people are gonna start to get the wrong idea about the whole Spider-Man thing. So he tells Miles here, and he just refers to him as Spider-Man because they all haven't made it to a first name basis yet. But when Peter's like, hey, Spider-Man, you can tell it's still weird for Peter. But he tells Miles here, since they've been looking around for a long time, how they've attracted a lot of attention and the cops are probably on the way. And he starts to go into the whole idea of the bad people on this world who are looking for guys like them. And right there, Miles is like, so come and look then, just before he goes into camouflage mode and continues on his way. And this just has Richard asking his dad, can you become invisible? And he's like, that's so cool. And you can just tell in this moment that Peter, he's going through it. But he catches up with Miles and tells him, look, it's been hours. If she were in the area, we'd have found her. Why don't you crash at our place tonight and we'll start fresh? But Miles just stops him right there and he's like, Crash, that's my sister, man. She's 11 months old and doesn't know a single person in this universe. Look, you guys do you, but I'm not gonna stop till I find Billy. Not for anything. So Peter starts to try to reason with him again, only for Miles to tell him, I'm good. Seriously, I got this. So Peter goes on to do what I think most fathers would in his position, because he's like, even though he doesn't like it, him and Richard will just come back and check on Miles tomorrow. So Richard hits Peter with the, but dad, and Peter tells him it's a school night and it's past his bedtime, which of course embarrasses Richard in front of his new favorite Spider-Man. And just before they leave, Richard shakes the mess out of Miles' hand while telling him it was so cool to meet you, Spider-Man, before swinging off and saying, I wonder if I could become invisible, which I really hope Peter didn't hear, because I got a feeling Peter ain't getting no sleep tonight. He's just gonna be staring at the ceiling while thinking about how he's his son's second favorite Spider-Man. And as Miles continues to look for Billy, he uses his camouflage again so he won't attract any attention. But while he's searching, he comes across a small group of hand agents, who again, Miles doesn't know anything about, but he can tell just by looking at them that these are guys that he probably should stay away from. So from here, he leaves the roof of Cornerstone Pizza to make his way and swing across the bridge to Brooklyn, with Miles hoping to find Billy in an area that might be more familiar, though again, she's only 11 months old. So it's not like she can get around, let alone tell somebody where she lives. But Miles is basically desperate at this point, so he makes his way out to their address in this universe, since he doesn't have any kind of other lead, only to find that she's not there. And instead it's a whole nother family living inside. And on top of that, it isn't even the same kind of building, which now has Miles thinking like, man, we don't even exist here. Which to me, that's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. Like, I wouldn't be too surprised if we saw another Miles Morales on Earth 6160, and this is the thing that made me think of Earth 616 Miles while we're on the topic of variants, but it also has me like, man, I really want to know what happened to the Miles of this world, because the maker found his variant, we've seen plenty of Peter at this point, so I can only imagine there's a Miles out here somewhere. And so next, Miles just swings around what would have been his neighborhood, but he stops when he sees a sign with a picture of the Ultimates that says, if you see something, say something. And I think the bottom says the terrorists are not your friends. And next to that, there's some graffiti that says Ultimates Unite, which I want to say the Ultimates were using at one point so people would know where to go. Can't remember off the top of my head. But out of nowhere, Miles gets snatched up by Janet Van Dyne. And she tells him, a lot of people are looking for you, you know? Everyone's worried. They figure you can only be here for one of two reasons. Are you here to destroy the world or save it? And I mean, we should be asking Janet the same thing. But now we know who the two Ultimates are that Tony didn't have much confidence in, with us seeing both Janet and Hank, who are also switching it up, because she's the giant one this time. But also now this has Miles wondering if he can really handle everything the world has to throw at him. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like, and let me know what you guys think about that voice in Miles' head. Is it just a hunch, or are we heading on a path to where Miles is about to get a whole bunch of memories back? Let me know what you guys think. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.